Hey DIYers, welcome back. Today we're going to attempt to fix the crack here in this fence post footing. And I'm going to be using this Sika Pro concrete fix material to do it. I say attempt because one, I haven't ever used this material before, and two, this particular type of crack I haven't had to fix before either. Now a couple of things, kind of a backstory of what's going on here is I'm replacing my fence with what I call a forever fence. This is my fence post and I got a big concrete footing on each one of these, and I'm putting a concrete border all the way around, and that's what this gap here is for. And I'm drilling holes into these footings to put rebar. When I was drilling this hole, I hit rebar and kept going, and it wound up cracking this corner here. Drilled over here, hit rebar, and then I finally had a hole that didn't hit any rebar and drilled it in. And on this concrete fix, doing the research that I did, and research being Google, basically I put in what's the best material to fix concrete cracks with. And it said material with polyurethane in it, and that's what this has, is a polyurethane in it. And the other thing you need to know is if the material you get can do vertical and horizontal surfaces, because obviously I've got a crack that's running vertical. Because if it's only going to do horizontal, that means it's going to be very watery and it'll just run down through here and sit in there. Whereas this here does horizontal and vertical, so it's got a semi-viscous consistency to it, it says on here, in order to patch this. So we'll have a little bit of prep work to do before we can use this material. Oh, stick around to the end, because I got a bonus thing we're going to try. It's on concrete, but it's not on this. You'll just have to stick around to see what that is. So what I need to do first is take off this patch material I got here. If you want to know why I got this patch material on, I'll have a link at the end of the video and I'll talk about that. But I've got an angle grinder with a masonry grinding wheel that I'm going to use to take off this patch material from the crack and the holes. So I got a clean surface to work with. I've got a respirator I'm going to use. This is my painting respirator because I don't want this dust in my lungs. I don't have them out here, but I'm going to go get my safety glasses before we start on this, and we'll get this ground off. This patch material is not on here very thick, so it shouldn't take a whole lot to get this off. Looks like I got it all off. It's kind of hard to tell if you got it all off while you're grinding. And now that it's off, you can really see the extent of that crack. All right, so I put this clamp across here to hold this in place. I don't want this busting off of here. It actually made it flush. And it's not on real tight. I didn't crank it because I didn't want it to pop it out that way. What I'm going to do now is, this is a masonry diamond cutting bit. And I'm going to try and go along angled cut on each side and make a V on the sides. I won't do it on this top. And then at the end, I'm going to try and just go down the crack and make a straight cut. And basically open the cut up so the material's got something to grab to when it bonds it together. Okay, I got it all grooved out as good as I'm going to. You can see how much of an extent this crack really is. That patch material really hid quite a bit, didn't make it look that bad. Now what I'm gonna do is take a toothbrush, just some plain water, and scrub the crack out so that there's no loose material in there. I've already taken out a couple pieces of sand that were kind of loose. And this piece right here wiggles, but I'm not taking it out. I want it to stay in place and hopefully get glued back together and be strong. I'm gonna let that dry for a little bit. It looks to have dried enough now. I've got this dowel rod in the actual hole that I'm gonna use, and I've got it in there so none of this material gets in that hole and I have to worry about drilling it out or something. So that's in there to kind of plug it. Now this material here, it says you put it in and you smooth the bead, which to me means you tool it. So I don't know if a plastic scraper or a metal putty knife is going to work the best. The other thing this thing doesn't say is how deep a crack to go. The only thing I found was under coverage, and it said half by quarter will cover 12.1 linear feet. So is the half the width or half the depth? But I don't have much more than 3/8 anyway. And the holes themselves over here, I'm not gonna plug them with this. I mean, some of it'll get into one hole, but I got another material I'm gonna use for the actual holes to cover those. And I've just got some twisted wire that I'm gonna use here to puncture the foil or whatever it is down in there. Standard caulking gun, nothing special. I'll tell you, it is smooth looking like a caulking and not rough like some other materials I've worked with for different things. The nice thing about this is I got a little bit of a working time. Now, let me put this clamp on. Push this back into place. Well, it looks like the plastic one's going to work just fine. It's tooling pretty easy. I was expecting it to be kind of gritty and sandy, but it's not. It's kind of like working with a sticky, gooey caulking. It's not bad at all. Mineral Spirits takes it right off your fingers and your tools really easy. I'm gonna leave this till tomorrow because it says it takes 3 to 6 hours before it's tack free. A week for it to cure. I'm not gonna wait a whole week before I have to do some stuff, but I'm gonna leave it till tomorrow. I've taken my channel lock pliers to this dowel and turned it to make sure that it's not stuck to that stuff, because I don't want to pull this out tomorrow and it pulls that whole wad of stuff out like a piece of caulking. I'm gonna leave this clamp on because it's got it nice and tight. For this crack up here, in fact, it helped close it up by putting that clamp on. I just put a little bead of that stuff up here and rubbed it in with my finger along the crack, and then took Mineral Spirits right along the crack and cleaned it off. From a distance, you can't hardly see it at all. So I'm gonna be thrilled if when I take the clamp off, that kind of goes invisible. So we'll leave this and we'll see what it looks like in the morning. Now, let's go do the bonus. Okay, so here's the surprise. I got this 18 by 18 concrete block here that broke off. It's not really a crack, it's broke all the way off. We're gonna try that stuff and see, can we glue this back on and will it hold? I mean, it fits back together really well. I'm not gonna do any grinding or anything. We're just gonna smear it on this surface because it's clean. Put it on there, put the clamp on, check it out in the morning. Now, I'm not gonna put so much that it squeezes out everywhere. I don't want to create a big, huge mess. I mean, I do want just a hair bit of squeeze out, I guess. That way I know I got good coverage. And just to be safe, I'm gonna put it on both pieces. Okay. The clamp on this. Because I want to rub it in the crack, make sure it's filled. Tip it up, because I'm sure it's squeezing out on the bottom. Okay, I'll hold this up here for a little bit till it's done squeezing out, smooth it up. We'll leave it on this piece of cardboard. Take the clamp off tomorrow, see if it held. Okay, it's been about 16 hours, 15, 16 hours since we did this. And yes, to the touch on these areas where it's real thin, it's dry, it's not sticky, it's not gooey, it doesn't come off on my fingers. Well, it doesn't come off on my fingers or anything anywhere. But in these areas where I've got it quite a bit heavier, you can see it still seems a little soft and not fully cured, which is to be expected. And then with my pliers, I took and rotated this dowel and it moves and nothing's stuck and it's not pulling away any of the material. So it looks pretty good on both sides. The top I'm really happy with. If you look at it from 6 feet up, you can barely see just on this edge, on this far edge right here, that it looks like it's different and something's going on. But the rest of this, you can't even see until you get up real close and then you can see it. So I'm happy about that. Now, as far as this, I think I'm going to give it a couple more days to cure and see how much softer or harder this gets, because I'm kind of curious, is it always going to be soft like this and elastic, or is it going to firm up a little bit more? So let's go look at the block we glued back together. All right, here's the block. I still got it in the clamp, and I think I'm going to leave it in the clamp. But you can see here the squeeze out I still got even after I cleaned it off. I just left it alone. But again, it's nice and dry, but in this thick area like over here, it is kind of soft and spongy. On the bottom side, same thing, had a little squeeze out. So I think I'm going to let this one sit also another couple of days before I take it out of the clamps, and then we'll test it. But one thing I am going to do is I'm going to use this paint scraper for glass and go along here and clean this up and take all this stuff off of here, or at least as much as I can. All right, it's been a good 2.5 days, actually a little over 2.5 days since I did this. I've left the clamp in place that whole time. We're going to take the clamp off, and what I'm looking at is this thing going to bounce or spring open a little bit? Is it going to stay exactly where it is? I don't know. I'm hoping it stays where it is. This is now firmed up. It's not soft. It's got a little soft and play to it, but it wasn't squishy like it was before. In the smaller cracks, it's pretty hard. I'm gonna set the camera up down here close. I'll take the clamp off and see if we see any movement. Okay, here goes nothing. I don't know about you. I'll check the replay, but I don't believe I saw any movement. Well, I looked at the replay and I didn't see any movement, so that's great. So what I'm gonna do now, take my Olfa knife here and cut along and trim along where the cracks I filled were, like this. And then take a razor blade for scraping paint off of glass and clean this up so it's good and smooth and flat, because when I fix the rest of this, I don't want any of this stuff sitting proud, because it'll show through what I'm going to do next. It's going to be just like what I did on that block that we got to look at that I glued back together, which we'll get to in just a second. And just like the patch back there, this has been sitting for a good 2.5 days. And again, I'm going to take the clamp off and let's see if it moves. I'll get you a close up and we'll see if it moves. All right, here goes nothing. I saw no movement in that. Yay! So far, so good. Well, let's give it a test. This end here is pretty solid. I mean, it's got a little give and a little squish to it, but nothing like it did. When I clamped it up, I may have gotten it clamped in kind of a bow. But anyhow, this is the top surface. Okay, first test. Let's pick it up by just that corner and see if it breaks off. No, and I don't feel it flexing either. I think it worked. I think it has worked. Now I'm sure if I bust it like that, it's gonna break. I really don't want to break this. I really want to save it like that. That's kind of why I did this, to see if it'd work, because I got a place I could use this. But it's solid. It's solid. It's not flexing, it's not moving. It's like, oh man, that worked beautifully. Final thing I'm gonna do to make this become invisible is I'm gonna put a patch on here. But what I'm gonna do first is use this bonding agent. It's concrete bonding adhesive. And I'm gonna paint that over this area here. I'm gonna paint it in the holes that I want to fill, but not the hole I don't want to fill. And this I got this at Home Depot. Probably get it at Lowe's, Menards, wherever. I just pour a little in here because I don't need a lot. I always pre-wet my brushes before I use them. I just paint this stuff on and get it good and covered. And then I have a little bitty brush here that I'm going to use to paint in the hole and make sure it's got a bonding agent in it. Now remember, this hole here and this one here have hit rebar, so it'll help bond this material that I'm going to use to it. When I'm done, I just pour what I didn't use back in. Now you got to let that dry before you can put the patch material on there, so that's what we're going to do. I'll give this a couple minutes to dry and I'll show you how we're going to patch it. So I've got a 1/2 inch wooden dowel here. I kind of rounded one end, put that in there. That plugs the hole I don't want covered. And what I'm using is this structural concrete patch material right here. Now this stuff at 28 days has a 6,500 PSI strength to it. The concrete I poured only has 4,000. So this is stronger than the concrete I poured. And actually it's pretty strong. I mean, because when I drilled these holes, little shavings would kind of be hanging there. It's a very fine powder. It has no gravel or rock or anything like that in it. They tell you if anything deeper than I think 2 inches, you should have some sort of metal rebar or something in there for it to grab a hold to. That's why I mentioned these holes that we're going to fill. They're not that deep. At best they're 1 inch, but there's rebar in there for it to grab a hold of. It's not going to matter in this situation, but if you had a lot to do, you only want to mix up what you can use within about 15 minutes, because then it starts to set up. And I'm just going to use a margin trowel and a plain old grout float. I've used this several times and you can see it doesn't hurt it. I just put a little bit in the bucket here. And here's where you got to be careful. If you get it too wet, you're going to have to add more powder. Try to stay on the dry side. It's better to be a little too dry than it is too wet and runny. A little thicker than pancake batter. You don't want it to pour off. You want it to have a little bit of body to it. But we're gonna give that a few more minutes to dry, and then we'll mix this up and put the patch on. And a little bit goes a long way. I mean, that's probably more than I need. That's gonna be plenty to do what I have to. Kind of drizzle some water in here. And that's what we got. Now, it's gonna get just a little bit wetter because I haven't completely let the bonding agent dry, and it doesn't really hurt anything. How I've done a bunch of it, and it's been okay. I just smear a little on the grout float, hold it at an angle, kind of start at a steep angle like this, and as I get to the top, I flatten out, add more as I need, and I do take this margin trowel and make sure I'm packing it really good in that hole that I want filled. And that's the other thing, if this stuff is too wet, it'll fall off everything and you waste it all. And I'll take that wooden dowel out here in just a second to finish getting that. But I'll get this side here done. And I'm not pushing real hard. And I'm not putting a big thick layer on either. I'm probably doing at max a 1/16 of an inch. Let me take this out so I can finish. Don't worry, I'll uncover that hole and put the dowel back in. I'm making sure I'm grinding it in to that hole so there's no air pocket. Now I know I got a little of this patch material inside that hole. I'm not worried. I got no bonding agent in there, so it shouldn't stick to it. So I'll let this dry for a couple hours, come back, pull the dowel out, and I got a little touch-ups that I do, and I'll come back and show you. I think you'll be surprised how invisible this is gonna look. Okay, as you can see, it's all dried. It's curing. It's still got more time to cure, but you can tell where the two deep holes were because it's still wet. But barring that, you can't tell me, don't that look beautiful? If I did this right here and those were fully cured, you couldn't tell I did anything to this. This side over here looks really good. You can't see where I put that crack material in there. And I just took a piece of 80 grit sandpaper on a sanding block, sanded it up to kind of blend it, make it look good, round the edges off. In fact, I'm gonna go down through here and show you all of these and see if you can spot the other one that I fixed. I don't think you can. And from up here at 6 feet, you can't hardly tell that there was a crack there or that it's been patched. That looks beautiful. This will be the start of section 2. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Was you able to pick out which one I repaired? There was actually 2 of them. One of them you can probably tell, but could you tell the other one? And what I'll do is I'll put the answer down in the description, a couple of days after the video's posted, to let you know which one it was, to see if you got it right. I have to say, first time using this concrete fix material was really easy. It wasn't hard at all. It was easy to tool. It was easy to smear around. Did a great job of fixing the cracks. Absolute wonderful job of putting this back together. I was really surprised. Honestly, I figured I'd pick this up and it'd bust off. It wouldn't hold it. This stuff is supposed to be elastic. It is paintable after a week. So, you know, like on this here, you'd probably have to put some of that patch material on here and sand it and smooth it and kind of blend this so you couldn't see it like we did out there, and then paint it and nobody'd know the difference. I mean, you gotta admit, once I put that concrete patch material on that footing out there, it looked beautiful. You couldn't tell anything. I think it's gonna hold up for a long, long time. And this here, oh, unbelievable. I would definitely recommend this Sika pro stuff here. Now if you want to see more on how I do that concrete patch material, click on this video right here and it'll take you to that, and you can see how I do those patches a little more in depth. And if you want to see more about this fence, there'll be a playlist here eventually that shows an A to Z fence build that'll show that again. So until next time, happy DIYing.